Hi, I'm Emily Best, founder and CEO of Seed&Spark, back here at the Innovators House with an incredible panel that I think we decided in the green room is going to be about purpose, identity, and joy. I think that's what we're going to talk about today. And I want to let each of these illustrious panelists introduce themselves, but I'm going to start it with a question that we can focus on. I'm going to be an emotional wreck all day because coming back to Sundance has reminded me how much I just love this community and how much I love artists and how much I love listening to them talk about what they do and why they do it. So I want to just kick off right into the conversation to ask, who are you and why do you come to the work that you make?
This chair is a trap. I see what you're doing, Emily. So I'm Codie Elaine Oliver. I run a media company called Black Love, Inc. We celebrate and affirm the Black community through the lens of love 365 days a year, and initially launched with the Black Love docuseries, which is really just what it takes to make a marriage work through the lens of Black people, because we are often not represented well. And I also wanted to create something that we could see ourselves. And what we have spawned from that is an ecosystem of podcasts, digital series with a streaming service, live events, with our own streaming service, Black Love Plus, live events, robust social channels. And our commitment is, like I said, 360 degrees of love: parenthood, sisterhood, brotherhood, self-love, love of community, and just telling our stories through the lens of love. And you know, as we've all been talking quite a bit lately. I mean, in the back there about, for me in particular, trying to get through difficult moments in life and lives that we all experience through love, and identity. Did you say something about identity? And okay, how did I get to this work? Right. It kind of started with my parents being divorced and me being like, well, why did that happen? But really just wanting to show my community how beautifully we can be loved, since we have been told for so long that we are not worthy. And so we all kind of said that we are almost synonymous with the work that we do, because that's how I got here, is like Black love was in me. And I wanted to let it out and give a little to others.
That's beautiful, Alex.
That is really beautiful. And we were, again, talking backstage about how each of us so appreciate the work that we do, because it is centered in that, I'll rewind and introduce myself, I guess. My name is Alex Schmider. I'm the Director of Transgender Representation at GLAAD, the nation's leading LGBTQ media advocacy organization, and I'm also a documentary film producer. So I've produced films like Disclosure, which is about the history of trans representation in TV and film, Changing the Game, which is about trans high school athletes going up against nationwide systems trying to discriminate them out of being able to just be a kid, Framing Agnes. I'm forgetting a few more, but basically what draws me into this work is that when I was growing up, I saw Boys Don't Cry, and that was the first time I ever saw a trans man represented anywhere. And it was both so relieving and so terrifying to see Brandon Tina, who was a real-life trans man, when his gender history was found out, he was violently murdered. And so I thought that if I was ever going to be myself, that was what my life was going to be and look like. And so I couldn't ever envision a future for myself. So my work at GLAAD and the work that I do as a filmmaker is to try to share stories that provide that possibility of love, which I know exists because I live it, and my life is so full because of the community that I have and have built and am lucky to be surrounded by. And so for me, it's not only what I needed to see, but I know what others need to see. And also, if you're not a part of these communities or you don't know someone intimately who's from these communities, if you're watching people love us, you are taking social cues from them, because media is such a powerful mode of influencing how we live in the world. So I'm such a fan of all of these people because of the ways that stories really, truly can not only change how we see ourselves, but each other and the world around us as we're fighting against what it's always looked like, which really isn't reflective of the world.
Should I do what they're saying? I know. I feel like this is like a tough act to follow. My name is Imani Wilson Shabazz, and I'm the Partnerships and Engagement Manager at Plan C, which is a nonprofit information campaign about abortion pill access in the U.S. So definitely check out plancpills.org. And outside of that, I am an academic, and I am getting my PhD right now. So I'm a little booked and busy, but how I got to Plan C and working in the abortion space was really started in childhood. I grew up in Atlanta, and the reproductive health space there it's a little complicated. There is, in some degree, aspects of like reproductive choice and options, but it's really inaccessible for a lot of people. And so I grew up seeing a lot of people die, really, whether it have been from, maternal pregnancy complications or not being able to access care fast enough, even though it's like right there. And so it was kind of a catalyst for me seeing that and wanting to go into this space and see if there was a way to increase access for people in communities like mine. And then on the research side of things, it was kind of like I went into academia because I wanted to make research that people in my community could read and understand. Like I grew up in a place where the college attendance rate wasn't that high. A lot of people didn't graduate high school, and a lot of people actually did research in my community, but we never saw like what came of that. And so I wanted to go into that space, and if I am going to do research for my community, I want it to be something they can like read and understand and utilize. And so it seemed really simple at the time, but it actually is kind of a hard thing to do in academia. And so that's really what brought me into the space and into wanting to increase the representation and accessibility of reproductive health care in communities like mine. So, yeah.
I'm just like soaking in everything that everyone else has said, and I'm like, how did I end up on this panel? Hi, everyone. I'm Miciana Alise. I am the co-screenwriter of the film Fancy Dance that premiered here at Sundance a couple days ago. Thank you. I'm Afro-Indigenous. I'm from the Tlingit tribe in Alaska, and growing up in Alaska, there was not a lot to do, and you're inside most of the year because it looks like this. So films have always been like my escape, my way to imagine a world beyond the mountains that surrounded my community and beyond the darkness. And so I've always known that I wanted to be working in this industry, but I never knew how I was going to be a part of the industry, especially because there aren't roles for people that look like me. There aren't opportunities for people to enter the industry through financing or anything else. It's really tough. So I started writing scripts for myself. And luckily, through the Indigenous program here at Sundance, I met my co-writer, and she was feeling some of the same things. And we decided to break through this barrier together. And we wrote a film that centers around Native American women living on a reservation. And that's something that we've been longing for years and years and years. You know, when you see Native Americans in film, we're either tokens, background, some mythic figure. And we wanted to see a real reflection of ourselves, especially because right now we're up against some pretty big battles. There's a case in the Supreme Court right now that's dealing with the Indian Child Welfare Act, and they are actively looking to take away our agency to keep our own children in our own homes and in their communities and around their culture. So it's a huge responsibility to be an Indigenous filmmaker. We have been storytellers since our cultures first came together, and this is just, it's so nice to finally be in a space where people are willing to listen to those authentic stories. And I have to say, being here is in large part thanks to this beautiful woman at the end here who decided to produce our film. So thank you.
I'm just going to cry all day. Sorry, just all of you are outrageously cool and amazing. I want to talk a little bit about, and Miciana, you touched on, you all sort of touched on it a little bit, but like, we are fighting some real motherfucking battles, not just to be seen, but to not actually be criminalized in our bodies, in our very existence. I know that some of the folks here, in order to show their films, have to consort with like the FBI to make sure that it's okay. And I don't think people really appreciate like what an act of resistance and bravery it is to just show a fucking movie right now. And that being said, we can also get cornered into only telling stories of pain and suffering, in part because like that's all the funders, believe is sort of valuable. And I feel like all of you are doing something really, really different. And I'd love for you just to talk about the choices that you make in your work, and how you feel like that, like where do you locate that in this larger battle? Alex, you're holding the mic.
I guess I am. GLAAD is an organization that relies heavily on research and data. And so speaking from a trans representation perspective pretty exclusively, we just released the GLAAD Media Awards nominations, I think 2 weeks ago. And what's really interesting to look at is in the 10 outstanding nominees for drama series, I think it's 7 to 8 of those feature trans characters. When we look at the genre of comedy, there's one. And I think that speaks to a larger issue of the fact that, yes, we have seen increased visibility, but quantity of representation doesn't always equal quality. And I think something I'm really interested as a filmmaker is the dynamic and balance between what is overrepresented and what is underrepresented. Because oftentimes we don't even know what's invisible until we take a step back and be like, wait, I've seen this before. I know this story. And so what I really love to look at then is, and we were talking about this earlier, is love stories. Because if we look at, as Emily was alluding to, the struggles that we're all facing as our communities out in the world, there's an epidemic of violence against trans women of color, especially Black trans women. And I don't have any data or research to prove this, but I have a hypothesis that part of it is that when we are looking at TV and film to inform how we're responding out in the world, most of the time when a trans woman of color has been on screen, she has been reacted to with disgust and or violence, and or a threat to a straight man's masculinity and sexuality. And so the counter to that in storytelling for me is, well, we just have to see trans women be loved and love themselves, because that is actually what is happening in the world. But Emily, to your point, I think it requires a level of imagination, not only from ourselves as storytellers, but also from the industry at large, to identify and say, oh, we haven't seen this before, so we should invest in that. And then when we have a balance of all sorts of stories, then it's not going to be reliant on one individual story to bear the burden of all, as no one person should bear the responsibility of an entire community and an entire diverse group of experiences. So what lights me up, and I will end here because I could talk for hours on this, Rain Valdez, an amazing Filipina trans woman, has told me over and over again that love stories are propaganda for who gets to be loved. And so when I'm looking at the stories that I'm telling, whether it's about familial love or romantic love, community love, that's what I want to see, because that absolutely counters the cultural reflex to continue being educated, again, by the social cues that we take from the media that we are subject to watch, often not from our own choice.
I want to react to something that you're saying, because I was having like a real, you gave me a real aha moment here, which feels like sort of part of a conversation we've been having for a while. That is that, in fact, the industry loves to take marginalized identities as the source of conflict, when those are the very folks who are struggling for their identities not to be the source of conflict. And we're in a pivotal moment in the media space where the funders are fucking behind the ball on this. I'm looking at you out there, wherever you are. They're behind the ball on this. And so what I hear you saying is, I'm not interested in my identity being the source of struggle. And I just had to react to that, because I think it characterizes this ongoing mechanism for perpetuating the very situations that the folks who are actually experiencing them are trying to get out of, but then they have to go find money for the projects that they want to tell. And the people who are making the decisions still believe that the really valuable stories are the ones about identity being the source of conflict.
And I just want to say one more thing before I pass the mic. Most of the trans people I know, our lives are so full and rich because we finally get to be ourselves. What is difficult and frustrating is the world makes it so unnecessarily challenging for us to just live and be free and be happy. And so exactly to your point, I think it's that projection from the outside that ultimately we need to subvert. And actually, speaking to this panel, that's why we need authentic voices who are helming the stories that are being told. And specifically, I got to shout out producers, because producers don't often get mentioned, but we need producers. We need people in positions of power telling these stories to actually look out into the culture and see how one story fits into a collective. It does not live in a singular or on its own, and it has real world consequences.
I have to jump in because my heart is pounding. And so I hope I can articulate everything that I want to say. The first thing, okay, you mentioned funders. And so I want to go back to even the creation of Black Love, which was the docuseries specifically, which was my husband and I met in 2013. We barely knew each other, but we both had a film background, and we started dating immediately. We started talking about Black Love, which was an idea in my heart for a long time, but that I did not think was a document. Well, I wasn't ready to make a documentary. I had gone to film school to make scripted features. That's what I thought I was going to do. So I rejected the notion of a documentary. And him being a cinematographer and producer, among other things, was like, let's do it, let's shoot it. Short version is that we financed the series. We got a camera loan from Canon, so our cameras were free, and we just went and started shooting couples because we wanted to tell these stories. And ultimately, when we got distribution on OWN, we licensed it to them, and we own the series still to this day. And I say that to say that we went through the process of trying to get grants and all that stuff, and people looked at us and they were like, "Say what now? Just two people on a couch? Like why? Why does anyone?"
And somehow it's the most compelling television.
And so I say that I'm going to go back to funding in a second, but we just have to do it, right? I watched a panel a couple days ago with Dee Smith, is that her? Okay. And Kokomo City, and the fact that she just went out and made this documentary, with a music background. She was producing music, and I want to go back to her in a minute too, because I was so inspired by her. But ours was 2014 when we started. This was, I don't know, 20, what are we now, 23, 21 when she started shooting, right? We just have to go do it sometimes. But to Marciana's point, my husband and I run a production company called Confluential Films, and we can finance TV and film. And we have made a commitment to do so from marginalized voices, where, as he likes to put it, the only people telling the stories are those that should be. And so I bring that up now, not to say everybody please call us and send your stuff, but call us and send your stuff, because this is the commitment that we've made. This is important to us, to be able for you to write a film that is purely celebrating your community, and just highlighting you. And so it's so meaningful to me, to us. And so I think that's most of what I wanted to say. But that, A, we have to just do it, and B, call Confluential Films. But that doing so through the lens of love is so critical because it's seeing ourselves reflected. And so I'm sure I have more, but I said,
I actually just want to pick up on a thread here. It's like, I've known you a long time, and I know you've always had a lot of irons in the fire, and so has Tommy. That's how we get anything done in the film business. You got to be working on a lot of things. But I'd actually like to know, when you just went out and did the thing that was focused on love, how many doors did that open for you? What was made possible because you went and the way that you wanted to go?
I mean, every door that mattered. You know what I mean? Having distribution on OWN was obviously enormously helpful for the visibility of the series. But what we did from that point was we launched live events and blacklove.com, where we do editorial content around 360 Degrees of Love, and the podcast, and we have very different voices on the podcast. But something that I was saying to Alex was that one of the other things that it allowed me to do was meet interesting couples and have a platform to share their stories. And still to this day, but of course we ended the series last summer. But in doing that, I was able to push the boundaries of even what the Black community was historically open to. Right? So we were able to show queer couples. We were able to show a couple with a trans son and talk about it through their relationship, right? How did this moment change you all? And for them, it was it made us more focused on love. We knew we loved our children. We knew that wasn't going to stop, but we knew that we had to grow and learn so that we could be the best possible parents for him. And so being able to do that, just is so meaningful to me. And the other door that it is open, I've obviously known you for a very long time, but is to be able to have conversations like this with people that are standing in truth and love boldly and proudly. And as such, we have to support each other. And she was talking about her their Instagram being shadow banned right now. And I'm what we got to do to get the word out, because that's why the platform that I've built it so that we can keep using our voices and sharing our stories.
Miciana?
Yeah, I was going to jump in and just acknowledge that Erica and I faced a lot of those battles that you guys are referencing when we were making this film, when we were sharing this script. People really wanted us to be pegged into a genre, and our film really covers quite a few genres because what we're doing is telling the truth of who we are. And I don't know a single human being walking the planet who's oh, my life is just a comedy. That's not what life is. And people were really reluctant to change their point of view to see, oh, Native Americans aren't just these tragic figures. They can have joy, and they can have moments of triumph, and they can be crafty and maybe do some things that are on the criminal side. They can do whatever they want. And that's been a really eye-opening thing, because when you're the person living the story, you don't think about how weird it might be for someone outside who has an idea of who you are, how it might be for them to see how you see yourself and how you see your community. So that's been we've gotten a few questions in our Q&As where it's well, why did you make Jackson Roki petty thieves? Why are they doing these little things where they steal from people? And it's did you have that question for Walter White when he was cooking meth? Because I don't think stealing a truck is quite the same, but So there are those moments, but I'm also grateful for that, because that means that we're raising those questions in people's minds, and we're opening those doors of discovery where they're oh, I do need to change my idea of what this person is. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think being in the abortion space, and anytime someone's oh, I want to bring joy and humor to abortion, it's what? What? Why would you do that? And I think I think it's really interesting because, and it is true, the abortion space is heavy. There is a lot of struggle there, but it's also really inspiring. It's inspiring to see the way that people come together to help. And in the midst of all these abortion bans and the courts not being on the side of access, people are like, we're gonna help each other. Like, abortion is healthcare, and people do need this, and we're gonna make that happen whether you wanna support us or not. And I think that, especially being a person of color in the abortion space, it is I think there is so much pressure on wanting to frame people of color's abortion stories as something really tragic. And I understand to a certain degree why they do that, because they want to pull on people's emotions, and they want to essentially find that sympathy from people to try to push the narrative forward. But I think that there is something really transformative and really healing to be able to be the face of putting a little bit of joy back into the abortion space and saying, like, we're in this together, we want to support each other, and supporting each other in this can be so helpful and so healing. And I think specifically, since we at Plan C focus on more self-managed abortion, even having the option to be able to have an abortion outside of the traditional healthcare system is something that really blew my mind. It's like being able to have any type of healthcare procedure and have that self-determination over it and over your body and over that experience, and to be surrounded by the people you want to be surrounded by it's amazing. And I think that while for some people it can definitely be a very traumatic experience, for a lot of people it can be a liberating experience, and it can be something where for the first time in my entire life I had the ability to take control of my healthcare, of my body, and to do something for me in the comfort of my own space. And that's just not something that a lot of people in color in general get to experience in the healthcare space. And so I think that was something that really drew me to this work and to Plan C in particular, and to putting my face on these TikToks about abortion. But yeah.
Can I add something real quick? I would love to ask, like, the panel, like, so we're talking about joy, obviously, but like a common thread throughout what we're all speaking about is agency. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, like, how we relate joy to agency, the ability to choose and self-define. And so I just want to turn to my other panelists. Emily, I'm not trying to take your job. I'm deeply curious, and I'd be curious to hear from you as well.
Actually, I was just going to say, you just made me realize something, and I'm going to reveal a whole lot about myself right now, because you said, yeah, sometimes like abortion is a traumatic experience, but one of the things we're talking about is how nothing in storytelling is monolithic. There's no one genre for a person. So I have had both an abortion and a C-section. The C-section, way more traumatic. Both of them brought a lot of joy into my life. And so, like, the way that we treat stories, like, there are all these meta narratives that are the way stories are told, the way things are done. And it's funny because we develop them over many, many years, and it's never quite clear who exactly is controlling the narrative, but we get sort of swept into a groupthink, the social groupthink that is our sort of dominant culture. And these are the people who are like, what if we didn't as a group think that way anymore? Like, what would happen, right? So that to me is also part of the tremendous agency of artists to point at and name the thing that we're all doing without thinking about it, and then offer an alternative. That to me is part of that agency conversation.
Something that I was really grateful for ultimately, though it was difficult for me as it was for a lot of people, is that we launched Black Love, the docuseries, in 2017. And so by the time the pandemic happened and George Floyd was murdered, we were going into season 4, I think. And so I think season 4 was like premiering maybe October, but we have built a robust social community around Black Love, and not just the series, but again, all sides of Black Love. And what I had to do, right, while feeling the same pain and concern and fear as so many other people, and especially Black people in context, was try to find joy. I have 3 children, and Tommy insisted on going out and protesting during a pandemic, and 3 boys. And so I had to rally my team and myself every day to say okay, what we can do with our social community is give them as much joy as possible, reflect to them as much beauty and worthiness in us as possible, since we were just told yet again, our life doesn't matter. And it does. And that's my job, to wake up every day and tell them 3 boys that their life matters, and then tell, our social communities the same. And we put the docuseries on Facebook for free at that time. Go get that love, so I'm very grateful to have been able to do that for myself, even to give me a way to show up. So that's why this is joyful work for me, because that's the commitment. It's the only way I know how to operate.
Yeah. No, but I definitely, I was one of the people watching the docuseries during the looking for a little joy in my life. But I definitely think that is definitely something that brings me a lot of comfort in this work, that you can bring home a lot at the end of the night. I think that's probably something everybody in the abortion space does. But I think that just being able to be a face of something that isn't so serious necessarily, and I think everybody thinks of abortion as being one of the most serious things that you could ever possibly do, and it's for some people maybe that is the truth, but for other people it's something that it's just not that deep. It's we go to doctors for so many different things, and sometimes this is just a doctor's visit for some people, and I think that is an important space to hold too. And I always am so grateful when people will come into my DMs and are oh my gosh, thank you so much for making me laugh on this abortion TikTok, and I am always so happy that I'm able to offer that, and because I think part of being in the abortion space too, it feels a little, it feels like the world is imploding all the time, and everything is so out of your control, and that there is it seems like nothing I do matters, if you will, because the courts are just not agreeing. And but in this small way, it was something that I could do to kind of channel those emotions and channel those feelings, and hopefully help other people be able to channel those feelings, especially people of color, because I think it's just, there's so much shame and guilt wrapped up in abortion as well in some of those spaces. And so I think being able to just laugh about it, honestly, is just something that I didn't even know that I needed at the time. And it's been something that's just been such an incredibly healing experience for me. So
I can really appreciate that, because our film features a lot of our indigenous humor, and sometimes it can be a little dark, and you can kind of hear the audience wanting to laugh but not knowing if they should. But it's what you do to make it through, right? There's no way to tell these stories without having those moments of laughter, because it's a survival skill. That's what I keep saying. This is how we survive. We make each other laugh. But going back to the earlier question about your autonomy being linked to joy, that question just really hit me, because I've never really given much thought to that. But coming from, and I'm speaking for myself, not for all Indigenous people, but coming from my background, where half of my family is descendant of enslaved people, and the other half is descendant of erased people, that being able to tell our own stories, I'm going to try not to cry, but it's that joy in being able to express yourself. It's so liberating, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. And having people come up to us after our screenings, one of the first things that these Indigenous folks are saying to us is, I finally feel seen. Thank you. And it's just like that responsibility scares me a little bit, but I'm also just I feel so blessed to be a part of this moment and to hear the stories that you guys are sharing and to know just a little bit of the battle that we're all sharing. It's like, I'm so glad we're in this together. And like, I'm already thinking like, okay, how can I help you? How can I help you? Right? Because liberation for one is liberation for all.
And that, my friends, was the entire point of this panel. Was I'm not going to be able to stick the landing at the end because you just did, but we're not going to end I'm going to give you guys 10 more minutes to talk. But honestly, that is the conclusion. I hope we help people draw here, is that there's no fancy pants without confluential. There's no confluential without fancy dance. Oh my God.
I'm wearing the fancy pants.
You're wearing
The film is fancy
dance.
You're not.
I knew I was going to do it. No, the whole day I was like, don't say fancy pants. Whatever you do, don't fucking say fancy pants. And then I did. And it's on camera for everyone to know forever. It's okay. Yesterday I made a very bad mistake with one actor for another. And that's also, I'm going to get canceled at the end of this. It's fine. There's no fancy dance without confluential. There's no confluential without Black love. Do you know what I mean? Like these things that are really starting to work together. And I'd love to hear you just even go a little deeper there. I mean, you started touching on seeing stories that were opening up things for the Black community that are maybe not as an easy a sell necessarily. And so I'd be curious to hear about those sort of moments of advocacy across sort of multiple issues, multiple platforms, multiple identities, and where you find the challenges and the strength.
I think what comes to mind when you ask that is twofold. I mean, one, just summarizing, I guess, like the journey of Black love and talking about marriage has allowed us to do so much more. But it doesn't mean that it was always like even comfortable for me, right? And so I feel like it may be preaching to the choir in this room to say, like, watch things that aren't about you, right? Like, learn about other people, and that in ways, in opportunities that might make you uncomfortable, right? I watched Disclosure and put it off for a little while, but I knew I wanted to, and I knew, but I grew up in Texas. I did not know anyone trans until T.S. Madison. We were just talking about her a couple of years. I mean, we met during the pandemic. And I remember, I don't know how much you all know about Maddie, but she is a trans woman, first with her own reality show, I think is the big Hollywood thing. But she's also a very big personality, big old busty. Like, I met her on Zoom, so all that was like right here. And in a Zoom about love in the Black community, and then we remained friends, and like literally like was the first trans person that I knew. And I was so drawn to her, but also like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to, like, and so I've had my own journey through that in the last couple of years, and never, from a place of not wanting to learn, but like just, okay, like I'm about to dig in because this is not my experience, and I want to make sure that I do the stories that we share on Black love well. Frankly, as a mom, I'm always like ready for anything, and I want to make sure that whatever my children bring my way, that I'm ready for that. Honestly, that's where my mind goes a lot of the time in the stories that I choose to be a part of and choose to learn about, is like, I want to make sure my babies know that I'm for them all the time. And so I just want to encourage everybody to, like, it's not always comfortable to learn about people who you're not like, or who you think you're not like, right?
Sorry, are these your babies on your socks?
Yeah, girl.
Okay.
Oh
so
my
just if you want to know how
gosh.
for her baby she is, she's got their faces literally on her socks.
I don't know how to follow that. I mean, I think to your point as well, it's not just other communities that we're not a part of. It's also the communities that we are, because we have been told things over and over and over about who we are by people who are not us. And so for me, in my work starting at GLAAD and throughout my filmmaking career, I'm always interrogating, is this really coming from an authentic place, or is it coming from my own lens on top of an outsider's lens, which to me does not make it an authentic lens? There's a lot of unlearning that I have had to do about the trans community, me being a part of the trans community, and Changing the Game, which is a documentary on Hulu about trans kids in sports, was one of those topics I really had to contend with. And it forced me to ask myself difficult questions about why. And ultimately it came down to, as might not surprise anyone, sexism and racism, and we could go into a whole conversation about that, but I think there's a fear about saying the wrong thing, about doing the wrong thing, but there's also such an amazing opportunity in accountability. It doesn't have to be about canceling anybody. It's like, if someone calls you forward, what a generous gift. Because it means they're investing in you and believe you can do and be better. And so whenever I'm doing my work at GLAAD or as a filmmaker and I get feedback about, well, have you reconsidered this or thought about it this way, or is this harmful in the broader scheme of things, I try to be as open as possible, because that's only gonna make whatever we're working on better and allow everyone's voice to at least influence what ends up happening. It may not be the exact thing we all anticipated, but I think that speaks to like the collaboration and the intersectionality of all of our communities, because ultimately these issues we're talking about, they're not independent to any one of us. We are all, again, none of us are free until we all are, and we have to understand that we live in a culture that in so many ways was not made for most of us. And so we have to question at every turn what that culture is and how we want to build it to be a better one.
I love, my favorite thing about Alex is he'll be like, I don't know how to follow that. Wha-bam!
Mic drop.
We got 5. Great. So yeah, you were saying some interesting things before we came up here, Imani, about sitting at some of these intersections, and I just be really curious to hear you reflect on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest part of this journey for me has been trying to figure out who I am in a world that has already told me who I'm supposed to be. And I think that throughout this journey, I've learned, so yes, I'm a woman, but I think I'm Black first. And that has kind of been the lens in which I look at the world. And so I think as a Black woman, there is a really big narrative to be quiet, to maybe be seen, but definitely not heard. And I think being in the abortion space in general, there has also been quite a lot of, it's a white-led thing right now. And I think that there are a lot of people of color who are trying to make their voices heard, and it can be hard when there's so many big groups that have a lot more money and a lot more resources. And I think that in this, I have learned that I don't want to be quiet. I do want to be loud, and I do want to show that you can really do anything, even if they tell you not to. So even in academia, I think a really wild thing that happened was I was trying to write my like honors thesis, and it was on like BDSM as like self-care for Black women or something. And I was writing that, and my advisor was like, I don't know about this. This is like the language you use is like too accessible. And I was like, what a like weird thing to say, right? Like it's too
accessible. Interesting.
Right? And I think there's this thing in academia, especially where like academia is academia because it's inaccessible. You know what I mean? Like it's an ivory tower for a reason. And I think that being in the academic space, wanting to write accessibly is like not done, I guess. And so it's interesting to just be trying to figure that out, and on top of just trying to exist in the world. And so I think really the intersection has been a source of strength. It's been a source of, you're doing this work for yourself, but you're also doing this work for the people in my community who couldn't go to college, and maybe who did a research study that they can't even read because you chose to use, like, I don't know, like praxis instead of practice. Like, I don't know, something like dumb like that. And I've really appreciated having the opportunity to do things that I know that my parents could have only dreamed of, and I know my great-great-grandparents probably didn't even think was possible. And I hope that if nothing else, if there is some other like Black girl out there that's like, yeah, I'm gonna go get a PhD, and I'm gonna be like, I don't care if it's too accessible, I'm gonna put it out there anyway, and I'm gonna do it on what I wanna do it on, and I don't care if you don't like it, then that will be just enough for me.
I forgot what the question was. I was too wrapped up in these great answers.
I think we were to the last point that you made about liberation for one is liberation for all. I'd just be curious kind of how you think about your work located in this broader space and at these intersections with other folks and other stories.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to some of the fear that was mentioned in like saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, because while this is an Indigenous story that we were telling, and I come from that community, our lead character is queer, and my co-writer is queer, and I wanted to be really respectful of that and make sure, like, you know, I wasn't always sure. I was like, Erica, so if I write this, is that like offensive? And there's a lot of education along the way, but I think it really is that simple, right? Just asking the questions and listening and taking people's lived experience as the expert experience and the one that counts, right? I mean, we are told so often who we are by the media, but I think what's been really empowering for me as a storyteller is realizing, okay, now I am the media, right? So now I have, what is the Audre Lorde tool? The master's tools won't dismantle. Yeah, but I think that taking some of those tools back, it's definitely a way forward, and we can do with it what we can. So that's been my goal is, and you know, some of the panels that they've had here at Sundance from the different communities, I'm like, okay, I gotta go listen to these folks. And the really tragic event that just happened earlier this week in LA, there's this moment where I saw that news story hit, and you know, your automatic reaction is like, your heart breaks, right? But I flashed back to how I felt during the George Floyd riots and all of that going on, and how you just so badly wanted your friends not of the community to be reposting, to be talking about it, to be asking you how you're doing. And so I really like stopped myself, and I was like, you can't just scroll past this. Like, you need to take this moment and share this information and see if there's anything you can do. So I think it's just stopping those automatic pilot moments and checking yourself and asking the experts who live these lives what we can do.
Can I just add something really quickly too? I want to say, like, I'm inspired by all of you very clearly, and I'm very humbled to be sitting here with you. And I think I just want to also remind each of us that in the stories that we're creating and the messages that we're trying to tell to the world, we are also possibilities for people, as you were mentioning. I didn't know trans people could have jobs when I was growing up because I never saw that represented. I thought that I was gonna have to be a protester in the streets because that's the only way I saw trans people. I'm 4'11", 5'2" on my driver's license. I am not the one you want in the streets protesting. Like, I'm better doing other things with my skills and how I can contribute. And so I just wanted to say too, like, all of you are possibilities in the expansion of the ways that we can see each other, not only on the screen, but in just our existence. And so I just wanted to share that with you.
And I also want to say, because Miciana, you bring up something really important, which is like, it's as simple as asking. And I want to say, for white folks who sometimes go immediately to asking, just don't ask for someone's labor if you're not actually going to take it on, right? So I think it is absolutely fine to ask for someone's labor, and you might actually start by saying, please know that what I might be asking is labor for you, and I want you to have the opportunity to say that you're not willing to do this labor. But don't ask for someone's labor if you're not willing to actually fucking listen at the end of the day, okay? Because there is something that comes naturally to people in activist communities around accountability and listening, or it looks like it comes naturally. It's deeply practiced and it's really hard, and it is about sitting in a lot of discomfort. Some people are born into a certain amount of discomfort as a station in life. And so it seems like it comes more easily. It shouldn't actually really have to come easy to anyone at the end of the day, a certain amount of discomfort. But now it's time for a lot of us who've been comfortable for a really long time to start learning those practices as well. And I just wanted to say that because I think sometimes folks can walk away from panels like this with people who are incredibly practiced in this work. And I have done this in my life deeply. I thought I knew how to do it. And I think it does take getting schooled a few times, but it is really important that sometimes these panels are the labor that's being done, and it's your job to take it the next stretch of the way. I also want to say that 3 out of the 4 of these panelists have to get to a premiere, a panel. So you cannot rush them after this. They have to put on their coats and go. So if you would like to, with whooping applause, give them your admiration for the end of this panel, let's do that right now. Thank you tremendously to this audience, to our team, our partners at Boxed Up, Julie Haberstick for literally making all of this happen, to the Chads, who have been the greatest on-the-ground production team of all time, and to our friends and family at home, and to the Seed&Spark community. Ready? You want to take a quick photo? We're going to take a photo together, and then we're going to go. So you got to make room for them, okay? Okay, thanks.